Hell yeah. All right. Everyone knows who you are. So you don't have to do an intro if you don't want to. You can talk about the new situation that you have if you wanted. I don't know if many people are aware of that.
Yeah, sure. So name's Q. It says Quentin Willie on the screen. I don't know why I should change that. Nobody calls me that. If you call me Quentin, like, ugh, you definitely don't know me. But so just moved to North Carolina about what is it now, like 2 months ago. Shortly thereafter, had another child. So I have three kiddos. I've got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old. Those are both girls, and then we just had a little baby boy who's about 7 weeks old now. So life is a little busy. We are staying here in some of our really close friends' house um, in a one-room studio with a family of five, which is just awesome. Awesome. My kids sleep in a closet at night right now. So we're roughing it. It's good. We moved here to open up our own PT practice. So we should have the keys to it by Wednesday and start moving stuff in there, but mostly operating online for the last, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks. Been doing a lot with Athletic Truth Group and Ben Patrick, the knees over toes guy, which is going to be kind of some of the stuff we dig into today. I trained with Ben like 5 years ago when he was still in Clearwater, Florida. I started training with him online, and then I went down to his gym once or twice to train down there with him, just hang out and meet him in person. And that was back when he had like 3 or 4 thousand followers on Instagram. Now I don't even know where he's at. He's like 7 or 800,000. He's just kind of blown up since then, especially since COVID. He's gone all online and done a lot of stuff that way. But anyways, been training with the ATG system for quite a long time, incorporating it into other kind of styles of training. I dig it. And that's kind of what we're kind of a part of in a way. So me and Ben, we're not like business partners or anything. It's just we've been really good friends for a long time. Built a lot of trust with each other, and seemed like a good opportunity. Originally, we were going to be maybe working together, but that didn't quite work out with his insurance type stuff. So now we're kind of doing our own things, but still having kind of a loose partnership that way. But anyway, so today, the papers and everything we were talking about is on bullshit. This is going to be a great, pretty loose, fun talk. I hope today we're going to break the all-time record for the most times bullshit is said in a single conversation. I am positive of that. There's going to be some rants, going to be some rambles, which is good. But I hope that you guys feel comfortable participating today. I think there could be some really good discussion and no judgment zone here, man. That I think all of us bring some really unique perspectives to the table, and that's really where we get outside of what this thing called bullshit is. But I've been talking for a while, so something to kind of break the ice. I was going to have Chris play a video for you just to kick off the word shit and how often that's going to come up. But this is really funny. So, Chris, if you don't mind, would you play that video and let's kick back and have a laugh this morning?
For sure. All right. Can y'all see it? Yay or nay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see.
You know what shit? Hardest word in America has been the word shit. I thought it's easy that I know what shit means, but it turns out I didn't know shit. I think it's the most complicated word. Like, how can it be if something is bad, it's shit? If something is really good, it's the shit. I would have never guessed that. I had to study that shit. So important, the article. Like if I give shit, if I give shit to you, that means that that I'm telling you off. But if I give a shit, then I care. And if I take shit, then I accept that you are bullying me. But if I take a shit, I take a shit. And, and I learned that my shit is always good and positive, but your shit, his shit, her shit, always bad. Like, I can't deal with her shit. I have to put up with his shit. Clean up your shit. But don't touch my shit. And then I learned that if somebody says, I have shit to do, it can refer to any activity whatsoever. Any, except one, actually shitting. Nobody says that when they're going to the bathroom. Nobody, except me. I love to do that. I love to do it. I have to go. I have shit to do. What are you going to do? I have already told you. And then I learned that the phrase "and shit" doesn't mean anything. If somebody says "and shit," it's nothing. It's just something that you say to make your list sound longer. Like if somebody says, "Oh, I like to travel and shit." You have to know that they only like to travel. And to make it even more complicated, shit can be divided into a piece of shit. And that has a completely different meaning. A piece of shit is a bad movie, a lousy car, or a person who's being selfish. And the piece of shit can get bigger and bigger, but it can never be the whole shit. Like if I'm a piece of shit, I'm being selfish. And if I'm a giant piece of shit, I'm even more selfish. But if I'm the shit, I'm great. Thanks a lot. Thanks, I've been useful.
That's great.
Awesome. I hope was everybody able to hear that, or was it broken? You guys were able to hear that? Yeah, it's funny. Obviously, we're going to be talking about shit today, a lot of it, and specifically bullshit. But I thought that is kind of funny, especially the part where he was talking about how if it's my shit, it's always good. If it's her shit, your shit, their shit, it's always bad. And that gets down to some of the root of what Frankfurt originally wrote in the paper, or sorry, in the book on bullshit. One of the last paragraphs in that book, he specifically talks about what sincerity is, and he kind of talks about how being sincere or being, true to oneself is really one of the big definitions of what bullshit is, because it's not a true reality for everyone. It's just a reality for you. And what is true to yourself is very different than what is actually occurring objectively in reality. And there's some overlap in those things, but being truly sincere can be one of the biggest forms of bullshit. So I think that's funny that this comedian talks about how your shit being good and everyone else shit being bad, because this happens. This is actually kind of like realistic human nature. And that's the other piece about what we're going to talk about today, is that bullshit, this idea of pseudo profound bullshit. If you read those papers about those 3 big studies they did on what this is, to me, like pseudo profound bullshit, where they just essentially took random buzzword phrases, slapped them together that it made syntactic sense, that it kind of sounded like it's something that's real. And then they kind of identified that, one, that people tend to want to believe these things are profound, but not only that, that those who have some kind of spiritual connection, somebody who has a little bit more belief in the unknown, the unseen, the intangible, tends to believe more so that these things are profound. And it kind of defines those 2 things as the receptivity as well as the detection of bullshit. So how well am I receiving or detecting these things? Can I parse out what is logical, what is objectively true, and what is not objectively true, versus receiving it being, well, I think I have enough life experience that even if I know that this word maybe particularly isn't objectively true, I can see how that makes sense in some other maybe lived experience context, and therefore it becomes profound to me. Doesn't mean that it is profound, but to me, I see all how these things work together. And I think this is an important part of this idea. Um, Now, just to kind of let you guys do a little bit of talking and bring your ideas to the table first, too. What did you guys kind of understand is bullshit? And then on top of that, what are some potential examples that either you see in your own lives of this happen, or just in the observed media, education, really anything? Where do you see this happen? Go for it.
I think I can kick it off. Um, to me, and this is something that I've more so realized on this last clinical I'm on, because we have high school interns. And so they will come ask me a question. And I think my definition of bullshit has evolved into anything that I cannot explain very simply. I wasn't going to say to a high schooler, but I remember sitting there like the other day, and I was like, so they walked up to me, and this is just, obviously there's a million other experiences of this outside of physical therapy, but they were like, what are you doing with this person? And I was like, oh, I'm doing some like long coupled plyos. And in my head, and they kind of looked at me and they're like, what is that? And then I was like, wow, like that does sound like some bullshit. Use. Then I was like, jumps where they're spending longer time on. Okay. And then I started thinking about other things that I explained using like a jargon that we've just learned in school. And in my head, I'd like I'm sitting there just trying to think, like thinking, how can I explain this in a simpler way? And there were some things that we do that I was like, I cannot, like, this is a construct I've created in my head that I cannot explain it. It's bare bones to a high schooler. So to me, that's like kind of a more like working definition of bullshit that I am trying to use a little more daily, is just something that I cannot explain much more simply.
Yeah, that's great stuff, man. That will come into discussion a lot, kind of in the second half, is our own evaluation of the things that we believe, say the epistemology of why we believe what we believe and why we say some of the things we say. Because I think, just like you realize, we probably tend to bullshit people an awful lot more than maybe we would care to admit sometimes, and it's not out of a bad intention. So here's something else that I failed to mention in the beginning. Bullshit is not a lie. Lying, by definition, is that you know the truth and that you intentionally are telling the opposite of that truth, or you're spreading the opposite of that well-known or well objectively proven thing, and you're actively having malicious intent to spread false things. Whereas bullshit is this kind of nebulous in between, where it's like, well, potentially I believe this is true. I don't know why I believe it's true. And there's not really a pure objective, thing to say that it is true, but I'm also not intentionally misguiding or misrepresenting a truth that I know. I'm just giving you, the best that I can. And I just saw Logan, what is truth? Exactly. So, and that's perfect. That is the perfect question, Logan, because I think that's kind of what I'm trying to hit on a little bit in the heartstrings within ourselves, is that when you start backing up and looking at what is truth, I think you again start realizing how much of what we do and believe and say is bullshit. And that's okay. I'm not saying it's like something that we should see as this really bad thing, but the meaning that we attach to some of these things of what is truth can potentially lead down some different roads. Before I keep talking, anybody else, please, your definitions of kind of bullshit, how you see this come forward in your life or other experiences that you interact with from day to day.
I'll go. This is like a example that's just on top of mind with the like pseudo debate with Seidman and Israel. Really just like a questioning that Mike asked of like a lot of Joel Seidman's answers were just like, I mean, I think he said multiple times, he's like, well, I post certain things on Instagram because I know they're going to attract more and seem flashy. And it's like, to me, that's the ultimate version of bullshit. And I don't know how much of what Joel says is like all bullshit or a combination of bullshit and lying and just like being lazy. But that comes to mind where it's just the like publication, or not even publication, the uploading of information or videos that you know is flashy, but inherently isn't potentially like that magical. And maybe you either know that or you're just kind of not even being self-critical enough. You just realize that it's going to get the most views. I think that's like a huge version of bullshit as well.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for sharing. That's going to be another, you hit on another big part of what I wanted to talk about a little today. Before I continue on, I mean, is anybody else that just kind of had something they'd like to say or kind of burning on your mind that hasn't been kind of fleshed out? If not, it's fine. I just want to make sure you guys have the opportunity.
I think for me, and I'm trying to articulate this like properly based off the conversation that we're having. But like in chiropractic school and like the emphasis around like the adjustment and the power that it creates and like strengthening the innate and all of these crazy things that just sound like out of this world that don't even make sense. And then you listen to like the student body and clinic, you know, when they're explaining things to patients in the same manner that we learn in school. And like we kind of get stuck in this silo where, you know, we read the evidence and a lot of what we talk about seems to be more appropriate. And like I listen to our fellow students say things to patients like, you know, I'm realigning your spine, or, you know, you have this forward head posture with upper cross, lower cross, and it just sounds like total crap. But yet, to your point, Q, like it's not malicious and people are still getting better. And then I like self-reflect on the things that I want to do for people where it's more education and more like exercise based. But if we're looking at like pain and disability and things like that, I mean, everything on a spectrum kind of seems to help people pretty similarly. So for me, it's like trying to reflect to decide, well, am I like, you know, really any better than anybody else as far as the things that I'm saying or like how I'm trying to help people, or am I, you know, similarly spewing, you know, just as much BS as everybody else? And it gets kind of hard, like reflecting on those things, because I hear so many other people say one thing and then I want to say and like perpetuate another, and yet like both groups of people are still getting better. And it just gets challenging at times to like not think that what I'm doing is better than other people, and not like put yourself on a pedestal, but like stay humble and try and at least appreciate and accept that, you know, maybe the things that these people are saying does have merit somewhere. Like maybe there is an explanation. And maybe again, similar to what Mason was saying, like I just don't know what that explanation actually is, and I can't portray it very well. So like those things just get challenging, especially then when you have a clinician who's been doing this for like 30 years who perpetuates the same things. So now I'm looking at her going, well, I don't have this clinical experience. Like I'm a student, you know, I should be able to trust what you're telling me. But then again, I don't. And I keep thinking that everything you're saying is BS, not necessarily a lie. So like, it just gets like challenging and hard because like, I want to have these conversations with people, but at the same time, I'm like, well, they've been doing this for 30 years and they've seen success. So like, who am I to challenge those things and call it BS? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of where I've been at with a lot of these things, especially now that like I'm in my first clinical rotation.
I think almost kind of related to that when trying to think the whole, like, okay, we're trying to do exercise education, people are doing other things, and both groups are relatively getting better. Try not to hold ourselves on a pedestal. Are we like trying to are we essentially BSing ourselves by thinking we're so much better, we're trying to do this, we're definitely right, when the other group's getting similar outcomes?
Yeah.
I was gonna say what y'all just said made me think, and I'm like, it's like this cycle now that I'm on in this in my current clinical where I did an eval and like gave them some exercise. It was like patellar 10 up the eval, whatever. And in my head, I'm like, you know, I'm gonna hit some, like we're gonna lift pretty much. That's just my bias. And so I don't take them. And at the clinic I'm at, it's kind of just like the clinic flow that you kind of show everyone foam rolling and you show them whatever else. And like, not to shit on foam rolling. Sometimes I do it. Like it's, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm with it, but it's just not my go-to. Hardly ever. But it's like I gave this person some exercises and then my CI saw them the next time and there wasn't as much of a narrative attached to it, but he's very, just like he pretty much shows everyone how to foam roll. And the patient came back like the next day after that and was like, yo, bump those exercises. That foam rolling though, that's the stuff. Like I feel way better. And in my head, I'm like, damn, like I feel like I'm purposefully not giving them that based off of evidence and based off of just like, it's not really doing anything to create a structural change. And then they're like, that's what they feel like made them better. And so now I'm in this place where I'm like, well, like that's some bullshit if there's like a narrative attached to it. But like, is that the worst thing? Maybe, I don't know. And then, so I ended up then like the circle has come back around to where like sometimes I find myself doing that where it's like, yep, so we're going to pop over here. We're going to foam roll for a little bit. And another patient asked me like, what is this doing? And in my head, it was like really hard. I was like, just like loosening some stuff up. I like trying to I was then feeding the bullshit, but it was like this weird meta experience where I'm sitting there like, well, now I'm kind of doing both. And in my head, I think I validated it by being like, as long as there's not like these long narratives attached to either, maybe that's better. I don't know. Y'all help me with that.
I think I'm struggling. So the definition I think that Pennycook and then ultimately they got from Frankfurt was bullshit is something that is designed to impress, but that was constructed absent direct concern for the truth. I feel like the vast majority of people think that they're spewing the truth. So are they bullshitting? And it's like, I think that's where I get stuck, where it's like, all right, well, I get frustrated with a lot of my professors, but they're probably most likely genuinely thinking they're teaching the most valuable information. Are they bullshit? Like, they're not intentionally bullshitting me. So do you have like this meta bullshit? And then you have like, I'm just struggling to figure out how to even define these terms and to figure out like who is bullshitting or not.
So I mean, like in the clinic, I think most of us could agree, like we don't have either CIs or the PTs. They aren't outright lying. Like they're saying things that they believe are true to patients. Nobody's telling them something intentionally false, correct? So would it then be BS?
So, yeah, I mean, like, thanks for bringing that piece up in the definition, Chris. The definition of bullshit is also encompassing of a lack of concern for the truth. That we basically have left the pursuit of the actual objective, what is closest to the truth. I'll leave it at that because I'm thinking of what you said, Logan. What is truth? We may never know what truth is. But, you know, I think as long as you
Mayday.
evaluating, reassessing again over time as you continue to evaluate. And I think, you know, and that sounds nice. And again, this is very difficult because we are constantly swimming in it. I mean, we all of our lived experiences of what is and isn't real is constantly being influenced by what this philosophical thing is of bullshit, right? And so, okay, here's something that I'm going to go off I'll on a little bit of a tangent, but I'll try to be really just straightforward and vulnerable with you guys as possible. Some people know, some people don't. So I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Something, you know, that commonly people call that Mormons. Here's something that will blow your mind. Mormon is a derogatory term. That's something that we actually don't like that much. And it's not really a great thing to call people that are members of the church. And, you know, so my third great grandpa is Brigham Young. So I came from a line of, you know, the original history of this church. You know, my ancestors and people in my family were killed and slaughtered across the plains just for what they believed in. And now I'm fully aware that all of the, you know, religious beliefs that I have in some way, shape, or form fit into this context of what we're talking about right now. That there's no objective proof that I can pull and say, yep, this is objectively true. And there's no, and I'm fully aware of that. I'm very skeptical, extremely skeptical. You know, I'd be considered like edgy, so to speak, in my own like religion. But there's some kind of form that of human nature where we embrace a healthy level of bullshit in order to make sense of our very lived experiences that are so far spread and all over the map. So you have to have something. And this is where, so when I was talking with Hodges before, when I was in Nevada PT, him and even Derek Miles will agree with this. Sometimes they have disagreements with Michael Ray because Michael Ray is so far on the spectrum of stoicism and skepticism. And it's like, it's so nebulous and so uncertain that we never land anywhere. And even if that landing is potentially some bullshit, people need some level of bullshit to hang on to give them some form of certainty that they can work within a mental framework that gives them some form of purpose in life, even if it's not necessarily 100% objective truth. Because even exercises, I'm with you, Derek. I mean, I believe that what we do, and maybe this is some tribalism and some of my own reflective bias as well, but I believe that what we do, this kind of people that listen to, you know, Level Up, Clinical Athlete, barbell medicine type people, that we're prescribing exercise, trying to get more people active, maybe stay away from some of these narratives that we see floating on Instagram and some of these other kind of just less helpful things we learned in school that maybe potentiate into larger downstream problems and whatnot. But, you know, like, say you have somebody squatting and, you know, the person is asking you, well, why am I squatting? You know, it's like, man, I don't know. You know, like I'm trying to improve XYZ qualities. Like, Mason, to your point, yeah, dude, there's like sometimes where it's like, can you really tell them with a great degree of certainty why you are squatting? No. I would really argue that pretty much any exercise you give in the clinic is probably so much more non-specific than you think, that, like, it is not doing anything close to what we think it is, that here's something funny. You probably are listening to this or have listened to this. Adam Meekins was on E3 podcast a little while ago, not too long ago, on the shoulder, talking about the shoulder. And he said literally with people with like painful shoulders, he'd just have them balance on one leg and raise their arm again. Yes, exactly, Gabriel. The shits, something hurts in the shoulder syndrome, right? And he's like, yeah, it's amazing. Like, sometimes people just standing on one foot just, feels better. What'd you do? Like, I just stood on one foot. I don't know. I distracted you. Like, or he would scapular assist them in the wrong direction, like try to fight their scapula going down, and they would still feel better going up just because someone's touching their shoulder. So it's like, I would just argue that we probably fill in some of these gaps and bullshit pretty often, and that's not necessarily a bad thing all the time, because people do need it. And here's the point that I wanted to get to. So, Chris, when you were talking about Seidman and how he points, or he posts things on Instagram that get more likes, get more, clickbait, whatever. Let's peel back the layer here too on maybe some potential. I'm not saying this is, but Mike Israetel kind of does this too in that little breakdown after that talk with Joel Seidman, that debate. But let's peel back the layers of Joel Seidman's lived experience, right? So he goes through school, probably had all the same stupid BS education that we all did or are currently having, right? So now you've got that uphill battle. That's not necessarily his fault. If he was a really good student and just trying to listen to the people that were educating him at the school that he felt, was respectable, then okay, that's what he walked away with. No harm, no disrespect to him for that. And then you get out in the clinic and you start seeing that, like, man, it's weird, but when I get people really strong in these, like, shortened range of motion angles, they tend to improve some qualities of maybe jump or speed. I'm assuming he would have to measure something or see some kind of measurable result, even if the people are just subjectively reporting that result. There's something that's leading him to that, that bias of his that he holds and still has. And so, and in my mind, I'm like, well, of course, if you load people up in limited range of motion and get some weight on their back for non-specific reasons, they'll probably improve. And then even after that, for the athletes that he trains, it's like, okay, if you get someone really strong in those shortened ranges of motion, they might see a temporary improvement in performance, even though some other qualities on the back end are going to start falling off, some of the resilient qualities. Okay, cool. And then all these athletes, think about like any Division I athlete he trains, or any like professional athlete, at some point they're going to be done with him and go back to train with their team. They go back and train with their team. They resume maybe a normal style of training where they're going through more full ranges of motion, doing other types of training and sprinting. They may, if I'm not saying they will, but if they were to experience some kind of pain or injury, the first thing on their mind would probably be like, man, well, it's this training I'm doing now. And what I was doing with Seidman, that was making me better. Whereas they don't realize that potentially they just lost a lot of fitness qualities over the time they were training with Seidman, and now going back to what is more difficult in the other side of training, that's actually what has been building up. Who knows? I'm not saying that's how it is. I'm just saying that's one potential thing. But in Joel Seidman's mind, now it's like, okay, what I do has this very real quality. And I see that when people stop doing what I do, because he's only seeing this very, small window of time and space, that they get hurt or they don't have the same results or whatever. And again, it just perpetuates this thing. And we get back to what this bullshit is, which is your own lived experience, your own becoming very self-aware that your self-truth is the truth. That's what bullshit is. So now transitioning to what Ben Patrick does. This is going to be fun. So I pulled up, I'm literally just going to pull up his most recent post, and we're going to walk this down. Okay. Because I I like Ben. He's a super nice dude in person. He really is. I think he's doing a lot of good things. But the narratives, again, he does the same thing. He'll post things that he knows are going to get a lot of traffic. And some of the, I guess, reason why is that in his mind, it's like, if I can get more people to share, like, post, look at, read this thing that could be potentially helpful for them, I'm essentially helping more people. And even if I know that this thing that I'm sharing is not completely laden with absolute hard, nuanced, truth that's laid out perfectly in the research, it's still things that may tend to help people move in a positive direction and get some traffic. Now, I think you and I, all of us here, would probably have some qualms with that, and I do. I'm saying in my head, I'm like, okay, yeah, I see that you have to post these things that are like clickbaity and very like sensationalized in order to get it out there into the world. But there's also a non-zero risk and kind of potential narrative harm that comes with that too. And that's where I'm trying to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. But it's a fine line to walk. And just like this conversation where we're all kind of scratching our heads like, dang, what is this bullshit thing? Like, I don't know. It becomes like that. It's really hard to land on something. But here we go. So here's the most recent post. It was about a single leg back extension exercise. I have it up here. So it says, I believe the single leg back extension is the #1 most underrated back exercise because, okay, so right there already. The number, really, like the #1? Okay, well, I don't know how we're measuring that, or is that objective, but sure, it's going to get people to be like, huh? #1, huh? From this guy? All right. I gotta read up because this is serious. You know what I mean? So, okay. And then it's like, you can start on 2 legs and slowly give your back stimulus in both the long bottom and short top ranges. Okay, like, first of all, the 45-degree hyper is not really a back exercise. Let's just cover that. I mean, you can make it a back exercise, but it's really more of the EMG readings show like far greater biceps femoris and glute activation in this than something like a back. I guess depending on how you do it, if you're just like really arching up, maybe. But okay, so whatever. We're going to be loading the back in some way and getting people to move. So not like super harmful. Okay. And it's progressible. You can start with 2 legs. All right. That's kind of nice. It's scalable. Yeah. Okay. That's cool. I'm cool with that. #2, form should be precise, but the learning curve is still quick compared to heavier back exercises. Okay. What are the heavier back exercises? And precise? How precise? How precise do you need to be? I don't think you actually need to be very precise at all. I think as long as people just move, great. But you got to think he's also marketing to people who are just literally like seeing this on Instagram and just going to go give it a shot. So he has to be maybe a little bit more careful in his language of it needs to look like this, because if somebody gets hurt, they're instantly going to put blame on him. And so he's kind of walking that delicate line too. And that's why I think a lot of his stuff is very regressed and super scaled, just so that it kind of saves his arse a little bit. All right, #3, this piece of equipment costs $75. You could do it in front of the TV. I don't own a TV. It's true. Ben's kind of crazy. Like he hasn't watched like any TV in like 8 years, and they haven't owned one. It's wild. Anyways, he's like very stringent on that. But, and so, okay, so that comment there, like, sure, it's cheap. That makes sense. It's cheap, it's accessible. It's just like a simple solution. Okay, cool. But then say, maybe these should be mandated in all American homes, given the billions we spend on painkillers and surgeries for non-contact back pain. Okay, so now we're making a big leap. Now we're saying that this particular exercise has some, form or bearance on the low back pain problems, which, is it because you're not doing this exercise? Definitely not. Like, definitely not why. If everybody was doing this particular exercise, would we save all the back pain? Probably not. I really don't think we would, and we'd probably still be dealing with some of the same stuff, because anytime people hurt their back, they think like, I blew a disc out of my back and now I need an MRI and yada yada, right? But this exercise, people that lift and are super strong still have back pain from time to time, so you're not going to like necessarily save people from that. #4, by progressing to 1 leg, you help rebuild your backside from the ground up, because there is more load per unfortunately, lower down the chain, the muscle behind your knee, for example, is usually neglected, tender, tight, and weak. Okay. So what muscle are we talking about that's behind the knee that's tender, tight, and weak? Or like, is he talking about the popliteus, or like, are we talking hammies, calves, the gastroc? Like, what are we talking about? And how do you know it's tender / tight / weak? Is that true for everyone, or just maybe it was for you? Is this okay? So now we're getting kind of like, what, dude? All right. But if somebody doesn't know like where we're coming from and some of this stuff, like this sounds kind of like, oh yeah, dude, yeah, like back stuff, absolutely. Oh, sweet, $75, that's cheap. I can do this exercise. I'm like, oh, dude, yeah, that makes sense. Like I'm working my legs, not my back at first. Cool. Oh yeah, this muscle behind the knee. I didn't even know that was weak. I should definitely train that because I'm probably weak there too. Right? So here we go. Let's keep going down. I know we're just going to be shaking our heads and kind of feeling this fire burn within us. That's okay. Just embrace this for a second, please. Number 5, building balance between sides. More bullet equals a more bulletproof back. Okay, does it? I don't really agree. It's like, how do you know that? All right. Every area of human injury is more susceptible when the body is imbalanced, and one side is less capable of handling stress than the other. The weak side is more vulnerable. The strong side is more likely to get into awkward situations, trying to make up for the weak side. Okay, so we know stuff with symmetry and like all of the, if you go into like ACL, right? That's probably like one of the only examples I could think of where we're like, okay, some symmetry, getting people to a level of strength that's relatively symmetrical in the quad is good, but there's also tons of other factors going into that. That's not just symmetry. And there's a bunch of like motor learning patterns that need to come back into place before like that strength symmetry is actually realized on any kind of real field or athletic activity or landing or whatever. Like there's a bunch of apprehension and just relearning that needs to take place. So it's not just as simple as like building your sides equally and all of a sudden like bada bing, bada boom, your back pain disappears and you don't have any injuries anymore. But that's kind of what this message says. And then 6, I'm able to load and go to failure without fear compared to heavier back exercises. The more I push with perfect form, the more bulletproof and athletic I get. Okay. So now, even though I don't agree with the wording here, yeah, for people that have back pain, I love using the 45-degree hyper because it's super non-threatening. Like there's not weight on them. They can just move through where they feel comfortable. And then there's usually like those handles on the 45-degree thing that they can like, bail on it if something isn't feeling good. So yeah, I agree. It's non-threatening. It's a good way that you can start incorporating some exercise into that posterior chain without like really flaring people up or whatever. And again, that's all bullshit here. I'm just telling you what my personal lived experience is that when I put people on that have back pain, some people seem to dig it, and it seems like it's a kind of non-threatening way. So okay. Now number 7, even if we deadlift, we aren't working our back in 2 of the 3 ranges. Okay. Is it do you have to work all 3 ranges? Okay. A deadlift would be a mid-range exercise. The back extension also works both the short and ranges. This relates not only to protecting our spine, but also to the extension required to sprint and jump off one foot. Nor is that a knock against deadlifts. People all over the world, all different sports and interests, are making breakthroughs by using my system as accessory to whatever their goals are. This exercise is used on Fridays and just kind of explains like the program. So, a little plug for himself there, using my system. You too can be like me. That's classic marketing there. So I wanted to bring that up. A little cringe worthy, obviously. And here's my point, is that while I disagree with a lot of the narrative that is employed in what he's saying, I think there's a twofold thing where it's not inherently harmful per se. If he was saying like never bend your back in a certain way, right? That's where I really like have a hard time with people. Like Seidman, for instance, is like never bend past 90. It's like, well, all right, that kind of cuts off a lot of like movements. And then I think as well, like he's not saying that something else is not beneficial. Like he even mentions deadlifts. Like, yeah, deadlifts are cool. maybe not hitting like the bottom range of motion, but you could deadlift. And I think that's where I tend to make a little bit more concession to be like, okay, a lot of stuff I don't think is right about that message, but a lot of people are going to look at that and say like, hell yeah, I need to work my back out. Like, I need to get moving. Like, that sounds cool. I want to get strong. And I think that it is a net positive despite a lot of the potential negatives in that comment and in that type of framework. But I also think here's now to come back around to the bullshit piece. And I'm sorry if this is getting too rambly. I really don't want it to be that way. I'm just trying to walk you down this path. Is that tall walking shill? Logan, you might have to explain. Maybe I don't.
Good.
Maybe I'm educated.
Chris posted something in the chat. There was a comment about somebody saying that you should walk tall to avoid medication and stuff. It was just, you'll have to look at the picture. It's funny.
Okay, sorry. I was like, is this something I'm unaware of? Okay. No, but think about, we kind of did like the Joel Seedman thing. Think about Ben's experience. You know, and this is real. You know, Ben's a guy, but he, you know, had these knee surgeries and really like just terrible history. He was like super unathletic, could not jump, could not really bend very well. And then to have his own lived experience of dealing with healthcare, he probably talked to some of the very people that we wouldn't agree with in the PT world or doctor world that are like, oh yeah, you'll never bend your knee and you should never do this and yada yada, you know. And then he goes and finds someone like Charles Poliquin who's like, no, let's train, and he just does some training, and some of it's kind of unconventional, but a lot of it's just training, you know, and probably had some non-specific effects along the way. He got stronger, bada bing, bada boom. Now he can, you know, bend his knees despite what doctors told him that he would ever achieve. You know, and I'm sure many people have had that same lived experience, but now his meaning and attachment to his lived experience is that the medical world and science told him one thing that really didn't work for him. He found something that wasn't, you know, maybe at the time that he was aware, wasn't the medical advice, even though I think there's a lot of really good practitioners who could have equally walked him down that path all the same. And now his lived experience is attached to this thing, that this thing over here did not work. And this is my understanding of what the medical realm is. And then this thing over here, my lived experience worked really, really well. And all of the things and the BS that I was told from past mentors actually tended to work for me. And why they worked is what he is not currently aware of, and that's okay. But you know, I think that his lived experience is now what he's falling back on, which goes back to what Frankfurt was saying is truly bullshit, is that your sincerity or your own personal lived experience is one of the purest forms of bullshit. He has basically neglected what is maybe out there in the science and taking all things together and the nuances and complexities of what is care for a knee. And he's just saying, well, this is my lived experience that I did these things over here and bada bing, bada boom. It worked for me. It took me, you know, years of training, but I can tell you, man, like I've trained with Ben in person. The dude is very strong and the dude is really, really bouncy. And like, I mean, the amount of things he can do just like without warming up at all and just bang out some stuff that's like very impressive. I was impressed, man. I got to say, like, the dude has gotten to a physical level on his own that was impressive. But that doesn't mean that what his system is or what he does is the thing. It just means it's a thing. And it's a one potential way that people can train. And given, you know, if somebody has knee pain, there's probably some other loopholes and things that need to happen before they can just jump into an ATG program. And one of the things that I see a lot of people for, because I kind of do my sort of niche area with ATG, is I'm helping people get to a point where they can do the ATG program because they see Ben. He has an active audience. And so I'm using his audience to say like, hey, you know, these things are good, but if you can't do them yet, like that's totally okay too, because there's other things that are good as well. And let's have a more candid conversation about that, and let me help you walk through some of the nuances and narratives, that it's not as simple as just like, do an ATG split squat and you're fine. So a lot of what I see is people that have basically done the zero program, which is essentially just like a body weight type thing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this or not, but Ben has like 3 different tiers, and the first one's zero, and it's mostly just getting people an introductory to movement, where it's just mostly body weight. But people that are in pain will do that. Like, let's say they have a tendinopathy, and they'll just be stuck on body weight for like 8, 12 weeks, and they're like, yeah, I just can't get over this like tendinopathy, even though I'm doing all of Ben's stuff. And it's like, well, what are you doing? Well, I just do zero, just do the body weight. Like, well, yeah, like you're missing out on like a bunch of other qualities of the strength. And you're like, wait, so I could do like heavy leg press and then do some of the zero. I'm like, yeah, amazing. Weird, right? It's crazy. Like, we should probably do some of that. And so that's where it becomes harmful. But I guess I just mean to say that, like, can you really blame the guy? Can you blame Seidman? Can you blame these people when their own lived experiences continue to reconfirm and tell them, that what they're doing is working? I mean, there's like thousands of people who will message Ben and be like, oh, dude, your program's so great. Thanks. And it just reconfirms his own bias. And when they haven't had the same kind of exposure to uncertainty and the same kind of experiences and mentors that we have, I think that's where I'm more willing to give these people a little bit more leeway and just be a little bit more gracious and accepting of what they're bringing to the table, and then see how can I intervene in a positive way to simply help people that are kind of in this sphere of interest. Because if people get interest in exercise, people have general like notions that maybe training is a good solution and that surgery might not be a good solution, that these passive modalities might not be a good solution, but that training is a good solution. That's a huge hurdle that we already are trying to overcome. So if somebody is out there already just simply promoting that like exercise is possibly a good thing, cool. Like, that's a little bit of a win in the right direction. And then it gives us like an in. So all I need to say is that I think that I'm also very aware, like Mason was saying, how often myself and just we as clinicians are constantly giving out bullshit based on our own lived experiences, and that we're simply trying to navigate the complicated waters the same way everyone else is. We're all trying to play nice in the sandbox, but the problem is that our lines all cross each other all the time. So how do you, and this is really complicated. I had full disclosure. So I, being from Utah and the way that I was raised, I was taught that like things like abortion, for instance, were just the worst thing in the world. And I'm not trying to get into any kind of political discussion. I'm bringing up a topic that can be potentially sensitive on purpose, because I wanted to tell you about this experience. But I messaged Derek Miles about this, and we ended up having like a super long discussion back and forth about this thing, because I was basically just trying to get a better understanding of where he was coming from, because he had like posted something, and I was just like, genuinely curious about that. Let me talk, because I don't know how I feel about this. Let me see how he feels and see like if I can make any sense of it. It was really interesting hearing some of the things that I had never considered, that I had been taught all these things and had this mindset and narrative built into who I was and what like culturally I believed. And then Derek brought up all these other things that I had just never considered, and it really rattled me in a good way. Like, I felt so liberated in a way that I could just think differently. And I think that is really like what we're trying to do, is become better clinical thinkers and of assessing bullshit. But that doesn't mean that it's easy, and it doesn't mean that we're going to sift through and basically be giving a lot of bullshit along the way. And so all I mean to say is like maybe we should give people a little bit more leeway and a little bit less hate, because I think we're kind of all in some of the same boat, maybe at different levels in that spectrum. Anyways, I don't mean, I've been rambling and kind of talking about some of these thoughts, but I'm curious to hear some counter argument to that and some things that I may have missed, because I know I have missed some things. But please share some thoughts with me about how this is connecting in your brain and some maybe potential like kickback.
It makes sense to me. Like I like what you said about Ben. Like he has thousands of people telling him how great his program is. And to me, if I had that, I would probably also think my, like I had the sauce. And I think it's valuable being in a clinic at a lower level where it's like you don't have that. Like you have people coming in who don't like what we did, or you're feeling worse, and you're hoping there's a net better. But I think it's very grounding. But also, like I do in some ways, I have sympathy for that because, like, yeah, if every single patient I had for what I did came in and was like, yeah, no, this is dope, this is awesome, this is great, to the magnitude he has, I would probably, share the same beliefs and speak a little more highly about what I do, for sure.
I'm struggling with I'm probably in agreement that like Ben's overall net positive, but does that should people still hold him to a higher standard and force him to explain these kind of absolutes that he does? And I know you're trying to be that like middleman within ATG, but it's like still hundreds of thousands of people are watching what he's giving. I feel like a similar example would be like a huge nutritionist on Instagram, or like nutrition guru that's overall like advocating healthy foods, like mainly whole foods, nutrition dense, but then they're like, this avocado is like the fucking shit, and this is what it's doing, this is what it's protecting. And it's like, you would, I feel like there's the nutritional like expert side of individuals just like calling that shit out, like Spencer Nadolski or even Mike Israetel or some of these other individuals, or like some of the Sigma nutrition people. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like Ben is doing good stuff, but it's still just like, who's gonna call these people out, and is he gonna listen?
Yeah, do you mind if I interrupt just for a second, because you're bringing
Sure.
something to my attention that I kind of left out. Do we get potentially more fired up about bullshit depending on the number of followers that somebody has? Because I see people with like 200 followers and they post bullshit, and it just is kind of like, nah, for them. They just don't understand yet, and they probably will at some point, but nah, that's okay. But then you see people with like all these huge following, and that they have so much influence. And now that that person posts bullshit, now it's like, oh, fuck that guy, like he's putting out bullshit to thousands, and yet people with 200, 100 followers, they could do the same thing, and they're not held to that standard. And you mentioned standards, and I do think that it's meaningful. However, I do think that there's a level of human nature about this bullshit that for ages, centuries, the snake oil salesmen, the people in the Middle Ages that would just pull their carts around and sell these witchcraft type things, it's been going on forever. And if Seedman wasn't out there, if Ben wasn't out there, if some of these like crazy nutrition type people weren't out there, somebody else would replace them. 100% would be there, because human nature to find these like weird bullshit novelist sensationalist things, because we just eat it up. It's going back to that whole pseudo profound bullshit. We love that when it sounds good, when it sounds like, oh, this has got to be it. It's like we just leech onto it for some reason as a society. And I'm not saying that like that couldn't change potentially over time. I'm just saying that this has been going on for centuries, and that if it wasn't somebody else, someone else would fill that gap. So then what do we do with it? Because here's the problem, is that I've noticed with social media, and it's very frustrating, but people that put out really, really solid, good information and really put out like very nuanced ideas and are really like clinging to the research and trying to give people a good leg up, they're making a wave. They're making good waves and pushing in the right direction. However, people that are pushing the sensationalist clickbait type stuff that I was just talking about, that post of Ben's, a lot in there is not great, but he gets hundreds of thousands of views like instant, and it's shared all over the place. He gets massive stages, you know, like Joe Rogan podcast and all these other things. So their platform is potentially the loudest, even if it's not right. So then how do we combat this? Because they're reaching the people. And I find more and more that the clinician based, very like nuanced thing, it's us. It's people like us on this call that are the ones that are like, yeah, like sweet. This is great. And maybe in some small way, we're making massive waves because then we see patients. We work with them one-on-one where some of this nuanced stuff is actually being caused to change and getting out there. But I think I battle with this personally where it's like on the media and the social stuff, people do not like nuanced, research driven views. They don't. I can tell you, whenever I post something that's like very like nuanced or research driven, people are like, man, whatever, next. But then you post something that's like sensational, even a little bit, and all of a sudden it's like skyrockets. You know, like people just eat that up. And why? Why? It's so frustrating. It's not going to change in necessarily like overnight. I think it's something that could be pushed and nudged in a better direction. But all I mean to say is that this has been going on for a long time. It's not going anywhere. So how do we use what's currently out there and causing the stirring the pot, causing a lot of, you know, sensationalists and a lot of views and steer it in the right direction? And that's kind of one of the reasons why I said to myself, hey, you know what? Ben's got a massive audience. If we could use this massive audience of people to at least start pushing maybe some better ideas and be, you know, kind of sneak it in here and there and start helping some folks, maybe we can have some changes. And so part of like the challenge is how do we get out of the echo chambers that we're all in on social media and other stuff and really start making big differences? And not just in the clinic, because I think I have full faith that everyone on this call is doing that. Like you guys are really good people. I see these names on, you know, clinical athlete forums. I see these names pop up on Level Up stuff. I know you guys are thinking critically and reading and doing the best you can, and that's going to spread to patients. So I commend you 100%. I'm so appreciative of this group and the groups like this, because I would definitely be far from the critical thinker and analytical person and willing to like break down my own thought processes more if it weren't for you guys. So first off, so appreciative of all of you. But I also struggle with like, man, what do we do about all this stuff that gets so much traction? And how do we just tilt it? How do we just right the wheel enough to start getting things in the right direction? I don't know. I don't have the solution, but that's what I'm trying to do. But I hope that makes sense what I'm saying, Chris, to your point of these people are going to exist anyways. And I do think that we get more peeved when they have more followers, even though they're doing the exact same thing that other people do. And it's just because this is human nature. That podcast that you referred to me, Iron Culture, with Omar Isif and Eric Helms, that one recently, they talked specifically about that, the history of strength training. They talked a lot about just the human nature of wanting to like basically push bullshit and have these novel sensationalist competing ideas out there. We just have always done this, and it will always continue to be done like that. And in 10 years from now, I really hope that I believe different things and I say different things than I do now. I should look back at this recording even 5 years from now and be like, damn, that was really stupid. I did not say half of what I would want to say now. And I think that's a part of what we're trying to do. But I don't know. I have more questions than I do solutions about it. I'm just trying to bring some attention to the fact that I think we are equally bullshitting sometimes in our own way. And hopefully it's just, all I could hope for is that it's a potentially more positive and helpful way that stimulates some better narratives down the road. But don't kid ourselves. We're definitely bullshitting often too.
I think like as you're talking, a good example would be like utilizing this inevitable social media as best as possible would be like Aaron Kubal, like on TikTok. Like his stuff's still very sensationalist and very like rattle the cagey, but it's like, you know, framework and skeleton is based off of him citing things or him like calling things out. And I mean, I haven't checked his TikTok, but it doesn't get like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of watches. So it's like it is possible. You just have to check some boxes. You have to be an attractive human. You have to be like good at talking, and then you have to be like concise with what you're saying. And so I think if you can get those three done, you can potentially do, because I mean, I'd be curious to hear y'all thoughts, but like I think Aaron is potentially doing less bullshit with still getting a ton of followers. So like, how does that happen?
I think even with Aaron, though, you could probably argue that he's on the far end of the opposite spectrum because he doesn't promote a lot of the other things that some people are looking for in treatment. So, and I'm not saying that I don't agree with what Aaron's doing, because for me and like the group that we're in, I would much rather like promote Aaron's page than some of these other people, because I do think it supports more of the evidence. But again, I mean, you know, somebody comes into our clinic and it's, well, how many visits am I really going to be with this person? Like, how much behavior change are we really going to get? And, you know, again, if we talked about like these personal experiences that they've had, if you've had a positive experience with something, I mean, am I really being helpful, or am I just pushing my own bias if I tell you, nah, we're not going to do that, I want you to exercise? It's like, it gets difficult in that situation too, because I agree. I don't think modalities or like manipulations are inherently doing anything specific. But if you come into my clinic and you're like, man, you know, I had a really good experience with this and like it helped me a lot, you know, I would like to talk to you about that. And I'd like to get a better understanding of maybe why that is and why you think that that helped. And, you know, maybe there's some other things that we can do to potentially like push the needle even further. But am I really like benefiting this person if I don't like meet them where they're at in that moment? Like I just think it gets really difficult still, because Aaron is so far away from like doing any of those things that it's like where do we even go? And I think that's the other part with like social media and even society as a whole, is that we don't promote like the middle ground because it's not sexy. We want the far left or the far right. I mean, we see it in politics, we see it in religion, we see it in food, we see it in exercise. It's like, instead of just like agreeing that there's good in everything, it's like Q was saying, it's my shit don't stink, everybody else's kind of does. And I think it muddies the waters, because there is inherently good in a lot of these things that we promote. But again, it comes down to like, I think why we're explaining why we're doing these things and the narratives behind it, and then how we're following through with it. And then it, you know, it makes it difficult because like Q was saying, you know, we got these people with these huge followings promoting like active based lifestyles. And it's like, man, that's a beautiful thing. But at the same time, we look at the narrative and we kind of cringe going, well, maybe it's not so great, but you know, where do we draw the line of, do I intervene and talk shit on this guy? Or do we, you know, just kind of follow along and see like, what is the overall consensus from the people on his page? Like, are there more people saying this is bullshit and it's not helping me, and then maybe we jump in? Or is there this overarching theme where people are like, man, like this has saved me, like I can do things that I never thought I could do? It's like, I mean, who am I to say, no, this is crap, like your narrative's garbage, you're not helping people, when he's got thousands of messages saying like, you've changed me. And that's where I really struggle, because I'm like, I'd love to say something because the evidence is kind of perpetuating this, but at the same time, all of these other people are going, no, this is beautiful, like you helped me. And I'm going, well, fuck, I don't know like where to go now. Like, it's one of those like, do whatever you want. But you can't also be that way. So like it gets extremely challenging, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Derek. I think it also comes down to too, like, what are people's intentions? You know, like I think all these people out there that we don't necessarily love, like a lot of their intentions are actually really like virtuous, you know, like they're just doing like the best thing they can think of doing with what, you know, ideas or what information that they have at the time. And you know, I think that's a really good point too with Kubal stuff, because I love his stuff. I think it's, you know, it pushes against a lot of the other narratives. But going back to kind of the thing with Michael Ray, I think Michael Ray has just awesome insights. What an inspiring guy to listen to. I always feel like I benefit when I listen to him. But there are times when it's like, well, what do we land on? Like, you're providing more questions and uncertainty than any kind of solution. And when you have a person in front of you that's like, okay, yeah, so you're saying like all this non-specific stuff, it's all non-specific and we're really uncertain about it, and that's okay, but like, what do? You know, and well, you got to do something. And then that thing that you do, even if we don't think it matters, well, if we're telling somebody like, it doesn't matter, then it's like, wait, what? Like, so then what are we doing? And it's like, okay, well, what matters to you, the person? You know, you're asking these questions of what's important to them, what do they like doing? But if they hate resistance training, but we know it's going to probably be good for them, then it's like, okay, shit, you know, like, now what? Because I can't do anything unless there's some small, minute amount of bullshit that's sprinkled into it that's based on my own, you know, lived experience and some of the things that I personally am interpreting from the research. And we can do a really great job of just giving what, you know, Eric Mara says of informed consent, of like, here's what the research says. I'm going to let you choose, you know, which direction we want to take. But I do think that there is some really difficult lines when we look at like exercise literature as a whole as a relatively young field. And there's very few actual exercises that are proven to do much of anything specific. And so, you know, when people want something that feels like you know what you're talking about, or they feel that they can have some degree of confidence in what they're doing, I think we just walk that line a little carefully. We're saying, you know, that we're doing this out of the sense that, yeah, we are uncertain of what exactly is causing your pain, but I'm not worried about anything here that's potentially dangerous. And I think we can move forward in a really positive way if we start getting some exercises done. I think if we maybe, you know, start loading in this way, or we start working on this kind of strength thing, I don't think that that's going to harm you. I think if anything, it could positively influence your pain. That's what the research tells us. And then we can improve some function along the way and have some more longevity in doing the things that we like doing in life. I mean, those are all things that aren't necessarily lies, but how we get to that point, there's going to be some potential bullshit that comes into play in order to make this person's program meaningful to them. Maybe I've been totally guilty of this, where somebody is clearly not ready for something, and but they really want to do it super bad, and you're just like, oh, you know, I don't really feel comfortable going there just yet. Maybe like post ACL or something. They're just like, I want to start like doing jumps or these depth drops because I saw someone on BIG doing it at this many months, and just kind of like, I don't know if we should do that. But you know, there's some things that I'll say in clinic that basically are a little bit less harsh on the person, that it's sprinkled with a little bit of bullshit to just help them along in the process and not get so like in their own head and feel downtrodden and feel bad about themselves. Like, I don't have to make them feel bad, you know, by telling them like hard facts. This is the way it is. And maybe sometimes people do. Like, I know Derek Miles is pretty factual, and that's fine. You know, that's his personality. It works for him. And I think that's plenty good too. But there are times that I kind of nurture people a little bit, maybe more than I should. And sometimes I say some things that I'm like, you know, that's not necessarily 100% objective fact, but for them in that moment, that might have been the best thing for them to hear, just because of all these other contextual things emotionally that they're dealing with, that like I didn't want to tell them they're a weak piece of shit today, you know, and like show them objectively how weak they are. So I just had to kind of like nuance it and move on and let them just feel like they left clinic, you know, at a happier way. And that's the art of coaching. It's the art of knowing what to say and when to say it, what cues to give and why you're giving it, you know, when to push the gas pedal, when to touch the brakes. I mean, there's an art to all that. And I don't think any amount of research could really necessarily prove any of what I'm doing, but you see it and you see it happen in front of you, and there is an art to it. And I hope that will improve over time, but everybody is so individual, and there's just so much, you know, nuance to everything we do, that I think there's always going to be some degree of quote unquote bullshit, even though it's not malicious. It's not, I'm intending to lie to them. It's just, there's some things that like, I'm not 100% are super factual, but in that moment, it's kind of, maybe it works for them enough that they can just get over it. Like some people will come to me and probably come to you too, and they have all of these really crazy beliefs, like Derek and Logan, you know, the chiropractic guys here, they probably get maybe more of this because they're like, oh yeah, my rib is out, or I need you to put me back into place, doc, you know, and I'm sure you see more of that than maybe we do sometimes, that you're, you know, fascial sling on this side is, you know, whatever. You've heard it from professors too, which is a nightmare. But, you know, it's like you have to kind of go down that road enough with them to let them know that you're not calling them crazy and that everything they're bringing to the table is just an absolute load of shit. So you kind of have to use some language that maybe you wouldn't use with everybody, because you're just trying to validate their concern, even though it's not true. But does that end up helping the person? And as we go through 2 or 3 sessions, maybe we've steered into some more helpful narratives and given them a little bit more bite-sized truth at the time. Yeah, I think we can. And all of that, now we're just talking about like the nuances and little itty bitty stuff that happens in clinical practice. But boy, yeah, these are challenging waters, guys. And all I'm trying to bring to the table here is that I think everybody's just along the same spectrum in some way. And just how do we minimize the amount of harmful bullshit that we give and provide the minimal amount of bullshit that's helpful and necessary at the time for that particular person in front of us. I hope that makes sense. I don't want to, I'm not trying to lead anybody astray here, and I don't want to say anything that's not true. I guess I've been reflecting a lot on myself and things that I say and do, and tough, you know, it's really tough. It's really tough to be 100% factual, because I don't know all the facts all the time. I'm so overwhelmed. Like I read so much, you try to get to the truth of everything, and at the end of the day, you just throw your freaking hands in the air because you're like, damn it. There's so much I don't know, and there's so much that's uncertain, and people want certainty and they cling on to bullshit. So how do we bridge that gap? I don't have the answer. I don't. I wish I did. I just am recognizing some of these patterns that happen in society, and I don't think it's any one person's fault. I think it's just human nature, and I think we can do better of, you know, how we judge others when we see it, and then how we steer the ship in a potentially better direction without having to feel like we need to attack or tear down other people for the good that they provide in the world, you know?
I think that was very well said. Yeah. Do you have any other final thoughts or talking points?
No, I mean, I just wanted to say that I appreciate you saying all that, Q. This has been a good talk. I've always appreciated like Derek Miles's thoughts around being confident but never certain. And, you know, I like going into a room and interacting with people and showing that I'm confident, but not coming across as like having all the answers, or, you know, telling people what I feel they need to hear, what they're going to do, and really trying to, you know, open the door for them to decide what kind of route we're going to take, even if it's not necessarily something that I full-heartedly want to do or even agree with. That, you know, I've really tried to learn that if we're going to get somewhere, like we need to be on the same side here. And, you know, even with my clinicians, because going through chiropractic school and like being associated with all of you, and again, I can't speak for like the PT curriculum. I mean, we get slammed with a lot of no-civic language, and there are a lot of old school chiropractors who I wouldn't say they're trying to be malicious, but some of the things that they say and how they get people to like continue to come back, I mean, it crosses some lines of, you know, things that I would never do. But again, you try to have an open mind and not attack and like berate these people, because they have been working in the system for 40, 50 years. People tend to get better. So like going into clinic for me, it was trying to be as open-minded as possible, talk to my clinician, you know, when she tries to explain certain things that maybe I'm not getting an outcome that she would like, as to how she would approach it, instead of looking at her like she's fucking nuts. You know, you just kind of smile and nod and go, Okay. And just try and get a better understanding of, well, why would you do those things? And then you just take it to the patient and see what they want. I get caught thinking that I have to be certain in some answers, especially in areas that I don't necessarily know real well. I had a young kid who had knee pain, back pain, and wrist pain. And I felt pretty confident with the back and the knee, but I looked at his wrist like it had 4 fucking heads. And I was like, I got to find something that's wrong with his wrist. And I'm standing there just looking at this kid, like having this internal battle of there's got to be something. And then on the other side, I'm going, no, like it could be nothing. It's just pain. So yeah, I think, we've all been there. We're all going to continue to be there. But I think as long as we're good people and we're honest and open, not only with ourselves, but each other, I think, we're headed in the right direction. So.
That was great, Derek. I think now this is the 74th journal club. I don't think there's ever been an ending call where I've been like, I have more answers now. Like it's almost always the opposite. Like you said, Q earlier, like I always have more questions. And I think it's like necessary to consistently have these conversations where everyone is just like, I don't know what the fuck's going on, because then it always like grounds all of us. And I just don't think that happens enough, either with students or clinicians or professors, where it's like, oh yeah, you haven't had these conversations, or you haven't been pushed or questioned, and now it's 20 years down the road or whatever. So I just appreciate these lack of concrete discussions, because it gives me like just some, I don't know, like not hope, but stability, and realizing that I'm never going to have that many answers, and it just is what it is. And the more I can face that on like a weekly basis, the easier it is to just like get used to it.
Clinical practice is tough. You can't be perfect, and you don't have to be to help people. That's kind of what I'm taking away from all this.
Tight. Okay, well, there's a Texas OSU game that started 25 minutes ago that I'd love to start watching. So I'm going to head out. But Q, thank you so much for kind of bringing this together and then sharing your thoughts on different aspects of it. And then obviously like your relationship with Ben and how you can kind of like step back and see all the positives and all of the potential improvements. And even like you said, with your own like religion and your faith. So appreciate you being open about it.
Yeah, I hope it's helpful. I think it's okay. I think it's okay to have a lot of more questions than answers, and just recognizing, and that's, so we'll finish on this. So if bullshit is the very awareness of self and certainty in self, I think we do well by doing the complete polar opposite of becoming very uncertain and unaware sometimes of our own, goodness or our own knowledge. I think that's how we do it. That's exactly what Derek and Chris, you just were talking about, is being uncertain and being okay with that moving forward anyways. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for joining the party, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. I don't have anyone for next week yet. I might try to find someone, but if you'll have any recommendations, let me know.
Yeah, maybe we can reach out to Hodges.
What about Hodges? Already came on. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
buddy. Came on like 2 weeks ago with Derek. They just were pseudo drunk and ranted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How did I miss that? Dang it.
You're probably your wife is probably birthing her baby. That's probably why.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. All right,
dude.
Yeah.
I appreciate you, man, with your all the things you have going on. You still make time for it. So, all right, I'll talk to you later. Thanks again. Bye.